The story starts with the boy throwing the tennis ball into the air, but it never came back down. It just hung there, floating in midair, completely still. And Andy stood there staring at it, not with fear, not with panic, but with quiet fascination. His nose had started bleeding again, a side effect of pushing his power too far. He wiped the blood away with the back of his hand, and the calm on his face said everything. This wasn't a problem, this was a beginning, because something extraordinary had awakened inside him. And it wasn't just him. The three of them, Andy, his cousin, and their new friend Mike, had discovered that they could do things no human being should be able to do. And instead of being terrified, they were having the time of their lives. They used their abilities to control water, to mess with a hairdryer, to send girls' skirts flying reckless, young, and completely free. Andy kept practicing, kept pushing, and with every session, the nosebleeds became less frequent. His body was adapting. His power was growing. His cousin believed this was just like building muscle. The more you train, the stronger you become. Then Andy had an idea. Why stay hidden? So the three of them walked straight into a busy supermarket. They pushed shopping carts with invisible force, made strangers freeze in place, and watched children's confused faces with barely contained laughter. After that, they sat down at a restaurant, stirring coffee cups without touching them, sliding food trays across the floor just to mess with the waitstaff. And when they spotted a shiny red sports car parked on the street, they moved it just a few feet. Then they sat back and waited. Kenny, when the owner returned and found his car in a completely different spot, his face said it all. The three of them couldn't hold it together. They burst out laughing. But among the three, one stood above the rest. Andy. Quiet, thin, and easy to overlook, he was by far the most powerful. He had been carrying a camera everywhere since this started, recording everything, documenting every shift in their abilities. He wasn't just exploring this power, he was trying to understand it. But let's go back to 3 days before all of this began. Andy's life before the power was the kind of story that doesn't get told, because no one ever noticed him. He was invisible at school, a target for bullies who had been making his life miserable for years. At home, things were no better. His mother was severely ill, bedridden, and dependent on whatever little money Andy could scrape together. And his father, rather than being a source of support, was a drunk who came home in a rage and took everything out on Andy with his fists. The one thing Andy had was his camera. That lens was the only way he could look at the world without flinching. His cousin could see where this was headed. A boy that isolated, that beaten down. He was slowly drifting away from everything, so he made a decision. He dragged Andy to a party. Loud music, crowded rooms, people everywhere, the last place Andy would have chosen. But Andy brought his camera, and through that lens, he started to see something different. He started to feel maybe that the world had more in it than pain. And that's where he met Mike, outgoing, fearless, always chasing the next adventure. Mike took one look at Andy and his cousin and said, "Follow me." He knew about a cave nearby. Something strange was down there, something worth seeing. So the three of them went. At the cave entrance, Andy took photographs, and then a sound deep and unnatural rising from somewhere far below. Mike didn't hesitate. He jumped in. Andy's cousin followed, and Andy, left alone at the top with every instinct telling him to stay back, jumped anyway. Inside it was pitch black. Andy called out, no answer, just silence and darkness pressing in from every side. And then he heard them laughing. They had kept walking deeper and deeper into the cave, and they wanted him to follow, so he did. And that's when the camera started to flicker. There it was, a massive stone unlike anything natural. Its surface pulsed with a deep, unsettling blue glow, and a low humming filled the air around it. Mike, never one to hesitate, reached out and touched it. The moment his fingers made contact, the stone shifted, blue bleeding slowly into burning red. Then the camera died completely. Then so did Mike. They all lost consciousness. When they woke up, Mike was floating, not falling, not jumping, floating suspended in the air with no explanation, no wire, no trick. His cousin tried next. He stood up, reached for something invisible, and crashed straight to the floor. But Andy? Andy barely thought about it. He felt something gather around him, some invisible force responding to his mind, and then he rose, higher and higher, breaking through the clouds, the wind rushing past him, the earth shrinking below. The three of them flew that day, free and untethered, the sky entirely theirs, until a private aircraft cut through the clouds without warning. The force of its wake hit Mike like a wall. He was knocked from the sky. He plummeted. Andy moved without thinking. He reached out across the distance between them and caught Mike, slowing his fall, lowering him gently to the ground. Mike landed safely. It was the first time Andy had saved someone. It would not be the last. Their powers kept growing, and the three of them decided they needed to understand where this had all started. They packed up and went back back to find the cave, it was gone, collapsed, sealed as if it had never existed, which meant one thing: whatever had happened in there, it had happened to them alone. They were the only ones. On the drive back, the sky opened up. Rain hammered the windshield as the three of them sat in the car, talking over everything. Then a horn blared from behind, loud, obnoxious, relentless. Andy felt something shift inside him, a surge of irritation rising faster than he could control it. One moment of anger, one careless thought, and the car behind them flew sideways into the river. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. Then Mike was already out the door and in the water. Pulling the driver to safety, the man survived. But the look on Andy's face, the shock of what he had almost done, that lingered. His cousin turned to him. No yelling, just 3 rules, spoken clearly. Never use the power on another living person. Never act from anger. Never let the outside world know what they could do, Andy agreed. He had no choice. And honestly, he knew the cousin was right. But even then, something had been set in motion. Later, the 3 of them stood on a rooftop and talked about the future. Andy spoke quietly about his dream: to fly to the highest peak in the world, to see everything he had never been allowed to see, to be free in a way his life had never let him be. His cousin interrupted him immediately. He had a better idea: a talent show campus, Camp's girls fame. So they signed up. Racken, his cousin, built the set. Mike pumped up the crowd, and Andy walked onto that stage and performed something that no one in that room would ever forget. He held a deck of cards, let them scatter into the air, and with a thought, every single one flew back to his hand. He launched small balls upward, and they hovered, moving on their own in impossible patterns. The crowd went silent for one breathless second, and then erupted. For the first time in his life, people were looking at Andy, not past him, not through him, at him. He became known overnight. Girls who had never noticed him suddenly did. And Andy, who had spent his whole life invisible, began to enjoy it, maybe a little too much. Then it all came apart in a single moment. Mike saw it. He saw a girl run out of the room, her expression a mixture of shock and disgust. He went in and found Andy sitting on the edge of the bed, alone, staring at nothing. Whatever had happened, it had shattered something in him. Andy's pride, always fragile, always hard-won, had been exposed. And when Mike tried to check on him, Andy turned that exposed wound into a weapon. He lashed out. He drove Mike away. He went home that night a different person. He lay on the floor and watched a spider crawl across the ceiling. He picked it up with his mind and then tore it apart without a second thought. The rules didn't matter anymore. His father came home drunk, as always. And this time, when the first blow came, Andy stopped it. He used the power to slam his father against the wall, to throw him across the room. Every year of helplessness, every bruise, and every silence, it all came out at once. Control. At that same moment, across the city, his cousin's nose started bleeding. He knew immediately. Andy was losing control. Mike tried to find him. He tracked him down and pleaded with him to stop, but Andy was already somewhere else, somewhere beyond reach. He rose into a sky cracking with lightning and looked down at the city below him like it was something he could crush. Kirill, his cousin, arrived in the air beside him. He had heard about what happened, the incident, the rumors, the humiliation spreading through the school. He wanted the truth. Andy gave him nothing but cold silence and left. The next day, school was a nightmare. The story had spread everywhere. People whispered as he walked past, and the same bullies who had tormented him for years were already circling again. Something in Andy finally snapped. What he did to them, he recorded it himself. He stood in the school bathroom with his camera and broadcast exactly what he could do, who he was, and what he was capable of. When his cousin found out, he confronted Andy immediately. His voice was firm. Andy had broken every rule they had set. He was becoming dangerous, not just to himself, but to everyone around him. Andy didn't want to hear it. They argued. It escalated. His cousin raised a hand to stop him and realized he couldn't touch him. Andy's power deflected everything. His cousin stood there, powerless to reach him, and Andy walked away. The next morning, Andy prepared carefully. He pulled out a uniform, the kind belonging to emergency services, and put it on piece by piece, a protective mask over his. He walked out into the street, found a man he had marked as a target, raised his arm like a pistol, and fired an invisible force that sent the man flying. People scattered, screamed, ran. Andy hit him again. The man collapsed and didn't get back up. Andy landed in the middle of the road, looked around at the chaos he had made, and flew away. He needed money. His mother's treatment costs were mounting, and $60 was all he had left. It wasn't enough. So he broke into a gas station. He blasted the attendant out of his way with a single thought, ripped open the cash register with his mind, and watched the bills fly into his bag. He moved fast. He moved without hesitation, but as he turned to leave, the attendant recovered and raised a gun. Andy stopped the bullets in the air. He turned them around, sent them back. The gun misfired. The gas station exploded. The attendant died in the fire, and Andy, burned and barely conscious, was pulled from the wreckage. He woke up in a hospital bed with his father sitting beside him, the man's face hollowed out by grief. Through tears, his father said that his mother was already gone, that Andy was all he had left, that he had driven his own son to this. He stood up and screamed at himself, at everything, at the years of failure. And at that exact moment, far away, his cousin's nose started bleeding again. He arrived at the hospital to find it already in chaos. Andy had regained consciousness, and he had brought the full weight of his power with him. He picked his father up with one hand and held him over the air conditioning unit and let go. His cousin lunged forward, caught the man, and set him gently on the ground. Then he pulled back before anyone could see him and disappeared from the scene. But Andy was not done. Again, he found his cousin's car and flipped it over without touching it. Then he rose into the air and went looking for something to destroy. His cousin followed him into the sky. They faced each other above the city, high above the streets below. Andy looked down and saw the crowd gathering, and responded by shattering every window in sight. Glass rained down in every direction. His cousin begged him to stop. Andy couldn't hear him anymore. Furzy couldn't hear him more. He was too far gone. Then a car careened out of control below and slammed into his cousin. He fell. The two of them clashed in the air, two brothers, two friends, tearing apart everything around them. Buildings cracked. Cars overturned. The city below fell into chaos, and then Andy's body gave out. He collapsed from the sky. Arakan. A wall of police officers surrounded him the moment he hit the ground. He forced himself upright. They opened fire. Andy reached out and froze every bullet in place, then redirected them, one by one, back toward the guns that had fired them. His cousin watched from a distance, barely standing. He had one move left, one chance to reach what remained of Andy. He stumbled into the open and called out to him, not with power, but with his voice. With everything they had once been to each other, Andy looked at him, really looked. And for a moment, just a moment, something behind his eyes shifted. His cousin made a choice. He pretended to collapse. He let the police swarm the scene and sweep him up, and in the chaos he slipped away, rising quietly into the night sky and disappearing before anyone could see. 1 year later, he stood alone at the top of the world Mount Everest, the highest peak on Earth, wrapped in silence and cold and sky. Andy had wanted to come here, had dreamed about it on that rooftop, in that other life, before everything fell apart. His cousin had made it for him. In Andy's memory, alone at the summit, he fulfilled the only dream Andy had ever spoken out loud. So, that's the story. What did you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this recap, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more stories just like this. See you in the next one.